Welcome to Disneyland, USA. This was all a Disney dream a dozen years ago, a far-out project that was totally unproved. Today, 60 million people have come here from every state in America and from almost every nation around the world.
DisneyWorld, the birthplace of many treasured family memories. Many would argue that Disneyland is the most iconic and recognizable amusement park in the world, with 6 park locations dotted across the globe. But did you know that Disney World in Florida was originally supposed to be a nightmare capitalist dystopia city ruled by a dictatorial Walt Disney in which he regularly subjected his citizens to experiments for the sake of technological progress? I'm sure you don't believe me, and I know that I sound crazy, but I promise I am not. First off, a bit of context. Cities in the 60s really sucked. They were dirty, disorganized, and riddled with rising crime rates. Walt Disney, worrying about his grandchildren and their future, wanted to work out a solution. His answer? He was going to build a model city of the future. This city would be called
Epcot, spelled E-P-C-O-T. Experimental, prototype, community of tomorrow. Here it is in larger scale.
Built on a landmass twice the size of Manhattan, Epcot was a city designed with people first. A radial design featured an entirely undercover and climate-controlled business district, with a state-of-the-art high-speed monorail for long-distance transit, a large-scale implementation of the Wedway for shorter distances. This was supposed to set an example for the modern city, with design ideas and technologies at the forefront of innovation. There would be no slums, no crime, no automobile traffic. Walt Disney would have fixed everything. There's a whole 25-minute film about the thing, which stars Walt Disney himself. And if you watch the whole thing, it actually looks really cool. But let's not forget that, at the end of the day, Walt Disney is a businessman. And that businessman has a lot of money to make. So let's get to the shady shit. Building an entire city is a big undertaking, and very expensive. To help with the costs of building and maintaining the city, Walt reached out to the biggest companies of the day to ask them to help out with the costs. The selling point for them? 2 things. The first was that Walt was going to build a large industrial park for large companies to house their offices and R&D facilities, and Epcot would be a city nearby for their employees to live in. However, the second selling point was that the citizens of Epcot would then become lab rats for these companies to run prototype experiments on. Great. There is specific legislation written up in the municipal laws of the district that allowed Walt Disney to test out experimental technology within the city. This was how Walt expected to keep the entire city at the cutting edge of technology. However, what that meant for citizens was that, on top of public infrastructure possibly being untested and not necessarily safe, the stuff inside their homes would be frequently replaced with untested prototype appliances of the future. Like, remember the Galaxy Note 7 and how that was a phone that would just explode? Imagine a whole city of Galaxy Note 7s. Imagine a whole city of just people with their phones exploding. Imagine a whole fucking city. Being a test subject for massive corporations probably doesn't sound like everyone's cup of tea. So what could you do if you didn't want to do that, but still wanted to live there? Apparently, not a lot, because some more context. The last time Disney made a theme park, he got very frustrated by the fact that so many cheap motels had popped up in its immediate vicinity, ruining the landscape surrounding Disneyland in California. So, with his next project, he wanted to exert more control. He did so by purchasing a huge amount of land that was surrounded by swamps, but also, he bought so much land that he was able to make the case that it should be a special district. Essentially, Walt Disney just created a completely new local government for his project, which still exists today, called the Reedy Creek Improvement District. Now, Walt Disney was allowed to make the special government so long as certain civil rights were still preserved, like the opportunity to vote for local council people as a landowner. So how does Walt Disney get around the fact that democratic elections have to be a thing if you own property within his special district? Psych, you're not allowed to own property. Which, if you're a millennial like me, it probably doesn't matter that much because you're never going to be rich enough anyway, but if you're old, rich, and white, Say goodbye to that second beach house, you fuckwit. Because of this, to this day, not a single election has ever been held to elect the council people of the district. This government has always been ritually appointed by the Disney Corporation. If anything were to go wrong in the city, say for example the pavements were cracked, or the police service sucks, or you don't have enough healthcare providers, or just anything along those lines, you couldn't bring it up with a non-partisan local government. Instead, the best you could do was bring it up with Disney himself. If your local council was doing poorly, you could just vote them out in the next election. If your private company, who also owns your entire city that you live in, including your house and your furniture, is mismanaging your city, complain to your boss, and possibly get fired. What the fuck are you gonna do? Alright, so here's where I got stuck. There are a bunch of little things that I still find iffy about the place, but if I gave each one of them their own section, I'd probably lose my fucking mind. So instead, I made a shortlist, and I'm gonna read them out as quickly as possible. Number 1. Stuff in Disney's current lifestyle center, Celebration, broke down with complaints of poor build quality and black mold in the ceilings of some fancy homes, so who's to say that Epcot's accommodation would have been up to snuff either. Number 2. Walt Disney designed it to have a single monorail running the entirety of the project, so that tourists were forced to pass through and look at Epcot before getting to DisneyWorld, which is where most people would want to go. Thus, Epcot would essentially feel like a people zoo, which sounds yuck. Number 3. Monorails apparently suck compared to almost all other rail transport. Like, they look cool and stuff, but they're really expensive and not that much better than a subway. Number 4. Walt Disney planned on having 2 separate layers of underground roads, one for cars and one for trucks, but he was also building on swampland and below the water table, so it probably would have flooded very easily. Number 5. Keeping all of the infrastructure cutting edge would have been extremely costly and disturbing to the residents. As much as the city back then would have been futuristic, I doubt it would have stayed that way unless boatloads of money were continually poured into it and residents were constantly having the stuff renovated, which would have made the place far less desirable to live in the long run. Whew, okay, ow, 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 ow. That's very heavy. Okay. Ultimately, to be fair, a lot of this is speculation, and everything mentioned was a worst-case scenario. But nothing was stopping this from having happened. And if you're skeptical of big business like I am, it's kinda scary. One argument that comes up a lot is that it would have taken someone like Walt Disney to see a project this ridiculous all the way through successfully, and without turning it into a nightmare. A lot of this has to do with claims to his character, and how exceptional and good of a man he was. All claims which are a little dubious and somewhat disputed. And even then, when he eventually would die, the current standards that Disney holds would have fallen into place, and the place would have fallen to shit quickly anyway. But hey, even though he never made the city, Walt Disney is still remembered for his visionary attitude towards animated films, and his cultural influence has undeniably changed the movie industry forever. And what would I know? After Walt's untimely death, the city was never built, and whether or not that's for better or for worse, we'll never know. Sure, there were possibilities of civil rights abuse and the creation of a perpetual underclass that was inescapable, and all of that sounds terrible. But would it have happened? I guess we'll never know.
4:36 is the time right now. All right, check this out. If Bill Gates gets his way, Arizona could be home to a brand new cutting-edge smart city. The company bought 25,000 acres in Tonopah. That's about 50 miles away.